Hi, this is the Evolution Lab podcast, and I'm Matt Roberts. This is part of my ongoing mission to keep developing the optimum way to help people reach their goals, overcome adversity, and change perceptions about what's possible to achieve with our bodies. The Evolution Lab is all about being the very best version of you. Please make sure you like, subscribe, and follow the podcast, and make sure you leave a rating and review. It'll help others to find the podcast to share and enjoy too. And now, let's get into the show. Hello everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Evolution Lab podcast. It's fair to say that the COVID years, as we will undoubtedly refer to them going forwards, shifted many people's perceptions of how they saw themselves, how they wanted to work and live their lives in all sorts of ways. Working from home, flexi-working, and increasing number of people who have decided to not work for a period are all reflections of what such a massive event has done to change us as a people. My guest today is someone who's super well placed to offer a potential roadmap through this, having completed numerous physical challenges, which we can touch upon in a moment. But having done so, having stopped working several years ago to focus on something completely different and challenging. Besides being a multi-endurance event competitor, she's a motivational speaker, a broadcaster, and award-winning podcaster who's amassed more than a remarkable 2 million plays around the world. Founder of the Tough Girl podcast and Tough Girl Challenges. Welcome to Sarah Williams. Hi, Sarah.
Excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Good. It's great to have you on. It's fantastic. Let's just touch through some of the key events. I'm always staggered by the extent, the range, the duration, the challenge that various guests that I have on the show talk about. And some things are just staggering. Now, yours are no different to that. In fact, in some way, they surpass many of them. So you've got just the brief headlines here. You've done the MDS, the Marathon Des Sables, which I think for an ultra-endurance event now seems like it's like a walk in the park. But it really isn't. It's a long way. It's like 5 marathons in 5 days, albeit it's different quantums each day. Each year varies, and it's in the desert, and it's in the heat, and it's all those remarkable things. You did the Appalachian Trail, which is 2,190 miles. You did it in 100 days on your own. Let's come back to that on your own thing. Crazy. You did the Lycian Way in Turkey, which is 509 kilometers over 29 days. You've cycled, in my notes, you cycled across Canada. And I'm not quite sure exactly which bits you cycled across. We'll touch on that in a second and find out.
I've cycled from Vancouver down the Pacific Coast Highway all the way down to the Mexican border, across the border, and headed down to Cabo San Lucas down the Baja, California. So not quite Canada, but a different direction. 4,000 odd kilometers though. Really
amazing. Not quite Canada, but a good chunk. The nice bits of it, a long way down that western coast, which is great. Well, the obvious question, Sarah, is why? Come on, really? Why all these crazy events?
Why? Because I love challenging myself. No, I love adventure. I love travel. I love pushing myself. I love exploring, and I love doing things which people say, you did that. So it's quite nice to prove people wrong. And it's nice to challenge yourself, though. It's nice to set yourself a big goal, which you know as a person that, at that point in time when you set the goal, that it's going to be a massive struggle to achieve it. But if you put in the work, if you do the training, if you do the mental preparation and give it your all, then you can go out to achieve it. And so that's what I really enjoy doing, is setting these big, scary goals, which also really excite me at the same time, and how much I have to grow and develop as a person to actually go out and achieve them. Because, when I signed up for MDS, I'd only run marathons before. I'd never gone longer than 26.2 miles. And that distance between 26.2 miles and the long stage of MDS, when I was running 52 miles, not only is it physically a long way, but mentally, how is my body going to react when I pass 30 miles, when I've run past 40 miles, when I've got the final 3-4 miles to go, across the desert. So these are all unknowns. And, you want to, or I certainly want to grow as a person and to learn more about myself and see what happens when I go to these really, really dark, challenging places. And for me, I really quite enjoy it and have a lot of fun doing it. And will hopefully encourage other people to get out there and to push themselves.
Which is all the idea. I want to dive more into the MDS in a moment, come back onto that. But one part I'd say within that one question I'd ask you is, would you say you're going into that, because that's your first ultra event, having done only marathons? I sort of hesitate with the only marathon part, because that's a long way too, frankly. But to jump into doing the MDS then is a huge, huge leap. Were you there to compete or complete?
Oh, I was there to complete. But my backstory of actually getting to MDS is I was actually meant to run it in 2015, and I just messed everything up. Like, I was overtrained. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was thinking, the more miles, the better. I was lifting weights. I was boxing. I was walking. I was running. I was just doing this ridiculous amount of training and basically burnt myself out. So my journey of getting to MDS actually took me more like, 18 months, 2 years, a lot longer than most other people. So for me, getting to the start line fit, strong and healthy was an achievement in itself, because I actually ended up the year before, like, bed bound, like my hair was falling out. I had horrendous acne. My left eye was deteriorating. I was having all sorts of health problems. And so just being able to come back from that was, a huge part of my journey. So I wasn't competing, but when I was out there on the long stage, I started overtaking a lot of competitors. And that's when goal creep can happen, because you're like, God, I'm really smashing this.
You got the bug,
I'm now
that was it.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm top 500 now. I mean, can I get to top 450? Can I get to top 400? Maybe top 250? Maybe I could win it. And it's like, no.
So with that sort of thought in mind, if you look at that, that's clearly, there is goal creep in there. And when you get into a situation where you're taking part and it feels sort of okay, it's a natural response to try to, what can I do here? Although saying that, I spoke to Ben Fogle on an episode about this exact same thing, and his approach of going to the MDS was pretty much that he didn't bother training and just went over there. He did some training, but it wasn't a great deal, and really undertrained. And his view was, I can go there and, when I'm running, that's training, right? I can sort of train into it. And so, I don't know, Ben, that's not quite the way it works, but okay, who can argue that? But he was there to complete rather than compete. He was there for the experience and being around it and that visual aspect and the excitement and the buzz, which I think is a great, amazing place to be. So everyone has their different reasons for doing these things, and everyone's motivated by different aspects. Looking at yours, looking back as being a child, were you competitive as a child in sport in particular, and then actually in all other things as well?
It's really, I think I was very competitive, like growing up, like playing lacrosse, doing rowing. I was sporty and I was competitive, and I definitely wanted to achieve. I wanted to get the A's and the A stars. I wanted to go to the good university. I wanted to graduate with a 2-1. And I think also when you work in the banking industry, there is that high level of competition. But randomly, since I've changed and made that switch from sort of banker to adventurer, I've sort of not lost my competitive spirit, but I really don't compare myself to other people. I compare myself against me. Like, where was I at the start of the year? Where was I 2 years ago? How am I progressing? What am I doing? I look at other people for inspiration. Even today when I was training at the gym, I was looking around me, and I really like it when it's competitive, but it's supportive and encouraging. So you look at what somebody else is lifting, you think, okay, she's doing goblet squats with like 26 kgs. Okay, maybe I should not be lifting 18. I should be doing like 26. And then you start chatting and say, right, next set, should we do 28? Should we do 30? And so you're pushing and encouraging each other. So I think I've definitely changed my level of competitiveness. But at the end of the day, even with something like MDS, like, I want anybody who enters the race to finish it, because it's just such an incredible experience. But there is a massive dropout rate. Like, I think the stats from 2021 was something like 47% of people didn't finish it. So I think there are certain individuals, like Ben Fogle, who didn't do the training and rocked up, but maybe he's got that mindset and that previous experience to go out and be able to do that. I would say that for the majority of normal people, that's maybe not as realistic. And I'm somebody who, I really do enjoy the training, and I enjoy the planning and the preparation. And that's a big part of it. I don't know, I just couldn't turn up to an event which I paid like £4,000 for and not be prepared and not be ready to do my best at it. So I think I definitely have a different way of looking at it then.
I think, the point of the Evolution Lab podcast, and what I'm looking at really is people's physical makeup, looking at their DNA profile, looking at their psychological traits and aspects and factors that make someone either perform or not perform, or performing different things better than others. And Ben is interesting in that Ben would never see himself as being a competitor, for example, but actually in reality, I think what happened is that his DNA is good DNA that suited to long endurance events. He just didn't know it and hadn't recognized it. And if trained and encouraged in a specific way sooner on, he would have found that sooner and done more with it sooner. as it is. He's done great later anyway, but it's more that. I think it's quite interesting looking at the points and the reasons why you find things about yourself. And for you, it sounds as though you had a competitive streak within your form, hence why you chose maybe to go into banking. It's quite a competitive world. And then decide to come out of that and find something different to focus on and use that competitive spirit in a different manner, because you've chosen things which clearly are massively challenging.
What's really interesting is I've had the DNA fit analysis done as well. And my feedback was that I'm actually very low on endurance. So I'm much better on like the power and the strength than the endurance. And it's really interesting because if I think I knew that 8 years ago, I wonder if that would have put me off doing these long physical endurance challenges, because I'm not, physically or ideally suited to it. So, but obviously you can train endurance and everything else, but I think that's just a really interesting fact.
It is, and we can know too much. We can definitely know too much. And data is fascinating. Data is crucial, and all the background about DNA and blood analysis and blood work is critical for performance and training. But we can know too much. We can actually understand ourselves to the point where it puts us off without question. Funnily enough, my DNA profile shows that there's a very specific type of response I get from doing cardiovascular work, that we could be on the same rowing machine or one side by side. And unfortunately, I've got a gene which, for everyone else, if I'm next to you doing the same thing, I get more back than someone else next to me does. I've got a very specific gene, which means my response is greater, which is a bit annoying for people, but just the way that it is. I didn't know that until I had it done. And if I had known that like you, then you change how you do certain things. I was a sprinter, not an endurance athlete. I should have changed it around to being a middle distance person. But you don't know until later on. But I think the point is you can train against that, and half the challenge might be training against that anyway. Maybe it's going against what you're strong at, and I think you choosing events which actually are as much mentally challenging actually as physically anyway. And I think I'd say that we're doing a 100-day trek was one that I suspect is pretty mentally challenging to get yourself through that duration. Would you say you had that in you your entire life? Because that's the Appalachian Trail, 100 days. Let's get my numbers again. It's 2,500 kilometers, some crazy number. So would you say that resilience was there throughout your life, or is that the thing you found later? What happened?
That's such a good question. I'm not sure with the resilience. I think I've been committed, and I've been a hard worker, and I've definitely been a goal-driven individual in terms of knowing what I want to achieve and then breaking it down to how I'm going to achieve it. And so when I looked at something like the Appalachian Trail, which is 2,200 miles, it runs from Springer Mountain, Georgia, through 14 states, all the way up to Mount Katahdin in Maine. I initially, I broke it down, and I was thinking, well, it's only 22 miles a day for 100 days. It doesn't sound that much.
But you checked out the terrain right before doing that as well.
Oh. Yeah, so it does run through the Appalachian Trail mountains. So it is the equivalent of going up and down Mount Everest about 16 times. So it's not a flat coastal hike. It is very mountainous and very, very challenging. But definitely right. It was a mental challenge. I mean, I was fit and I was strong and I was prepared to take this on. But the thing that I really struggled was to be honest, was feeling like a failure, like every single day on that trek, apart from the last day. And one of the big reasons for that is because I was always behind schedule. I was never on schedule. So when you do these challenges, you don't start off by doing 22 miles a day, or I certainly didn't. And so I started off doing 15 miles a day. So suddenly I'm 7 miles behind day one, 14 miles day two, and so on and so forth. So by the time you're 10 days in, you're thinking, I've got to make up an extra 100 miles here. And mentally, that can actually destroy you, because you're showing up every day and you feel as though you're not making any progress at all. And it was the last day. It was day 100 when I was finally on target. Where I was actually 5 miles behind, and so I had to add an extra 5 miles on to actually finish the hike. But I learned a huge amount from that, in terms of, showing up, being in the present, being in the moment, the mental resilience tips and tricks that I had to learn to get through the days. Because the thing that people don't really see on these big hikes and treks is it's not always sunshine. It's not always beautiful scenery. It's days when there's snakes, there's bears, there's no water, you've run out of food, your blisters have popped, your stomach's not doing great, you're down to your last Snickers. And it's how do you handle these situations when they turn up? And that's when you learn more about yourself, because you're like, well, I'm here. I want to be spending my time enjoying it. I don't want to be miserable for this full 100 day challenge. But to be honest, it was one of the best experiences I've ever done. I have actually filmed it as well, so all the videos are on my YouTube channel, and there's just some funny days because I do sort of share it all. If you're just looking for like tears and misery and a little bit of pain, like vlog 96 or 97, where I'm sat in the pouring rain, I'd fallen over in the mud, and I'm just sat on this step, like just eating Snickers, like, tears trickling down my face as the rain is soaking me. But incredible memories. And I know obviously not everybody wants to through hike the Appalachian Trail at some point, but challenging yourself and setting something which is outside of your comfort zone, that's definitely something that I would recommend.
Do you think the need to the knowledge you were going to record each day and report each day kept you going? Because there's clearly a point at which, I know, you must be at day 39 and it's raining and there's a snake under your feet and a bear chasing you down the path, whatever might be going on. You're thinking, what am I doing here? Why am I here? If you're on your own in the middle of nowhere without the purpose behind it, it's pretty hard to keep yourself motivated. I imagine that the reporting in each day, the film of each thing, probably keeps you a little bit on that need to basis, I suspect.
To be honest, like, not really. I think one of the big drivers was that I bought a flight into Atlanta and I bought a flight out of Boston, and I had no money. So if I got off the trail at any point, I wouldn't have been able to go anywhere and afford the flight home. And financial motivators. My mum and my sister were coming to meet me in Boston as well. I was also meeting another friend at the very end of the trip who was going to come and collect me and drive me to Boston. And it was also like, I've committed to doing this. I've said I'm going to do it. I am going to finish this. And there was definitely moments where I thought, like, I'm giving it my all. I'm giving it 110% every single day. And, what if I do fail? Like, what if I don't achieve my goal of 100 days? Like, would that make me a failure, even though I've still completed this challenge and this through hike? And you have to do some quite deep reflection work then about, your own version of success and how you feel about yourself. If you still respect yourself, if I had actually failed, I don't even like thinking about it. I don't really like the word failure. Like, it doesn't sit that comfortably with me. So it was good.
It's interesting because actually there was a recent study done in people's motivation and the reason why we stay motivated for success. And there's always this idea we should tell ourselves we should focus on the end goal, focus on the win, focus on the successful end of it and all the upsides, and have that in mind and not focus on the failure. And a really interesting research piece came out. I think it was out of one of the Boston universities, probably Harvard perhaps, but I have to check back on that exact one. But it said that the actual reality is, by focusing on the failure, by focusing on the downsides, by focusing on the what if it went wrong scenarios, plans B and C around it, you then actually succeed better than not addressing them at all. So we shouldn't dismiss them. So your idea and your terminology of having that thought in mind, what if I failed, what if I didn't do, actually turns out probably is one of the most motivating factors you can get, because we are planning for avoiding the failures, not looking at them. We just know what they are. We're thinking about the permutations of what might happen and thereby find the best route through to success. So I think actually what you're doing is, without realizing, subconsciously finding the best path to success, weirdly.
Well, I actually did that as part of my mental preparation. I don't know where I learned it from, but piece of paper on the left-hand side was every what-if scenario. What if I run out of water? What if my kit gets stolen? What if I don't have food? What if X, Y, and Z happens? And then I actually recommend it to people when they're planning adventures and challenges, because what you do is, when you're at home, in the comfort of your own home, get a glass of wine, get nice and comfortable, and you go through each of the challenges and think, okay, well, what if I do run out of water? Okay, well, I could, ask somebody for some water. I can walk to the next spot. I can make sure that I carry X amount. So I think it's a fantastic technique to use as part of that mental training and mental preparation.
I think it's part of that kind of due diligence before you do these things. That's kind of what that whole business world background thing is, just that you get to plan all the aspects, be thorough, and have everything in place. Then you know where the pitfalls are and you're ready for them. Anything which is just weird that's out of left field, well, it comes along and that's it. But you can plan for various scenarios and then you get more success for sure. Just stepping back a bit from that, if we just go back to the fact that when you were in the working world, you were doing the occasional marathon, that sort of thing. So talk me through the times that you were doing then, roughly. If you remember your kind of rough times you do for a marathon or a half marathon, what sort of level of competition were you at?
Well, my first marathon was 5 hours 15 minutes, and it broke me. And I gradually progressed. I think my best. Oh, that was London. So when I was 25, I signed up for my first London marathon, and then ended up running it every single year until I was 30. And I think it was 4 hours 30 or 4 hours 29:33 or something. So when you look at it now, you think, oh, it's not particularly quickly. It's probably why I'm drawn to endurance events, because you get to just run slow and eat loads of food, and there isn't that pressure. Because I actually think it's a lot harder to run faster. Like, I think a hard 5K would be more difficult than a 30-mile race, to be honest. I would like to be a faster runner, but I'm a plodder. I'm a slow, steady, consistent runner. I've actually been doing, I did a challenge in March called the March Daily Mile Challenge, which just involved, running 1 mile every day. It's about getting out the house, getting active, getting the body moving. And I had like a runner's bingo. And one day it was to run a fast mile. And oh my God, I did like 6 minutes 30, but I was stopping and starting. I was like, my hair was falling out, so I had to stop for that. My pants were falling, it was all just a bit of a disaster. And then I thought, I haven't done this properly. And so I ended up going out again to do a second fast mile just to try and be more consistent. That was, I think, around like 8 minutes 30 or something. But it's good to push yourself. And I think it's just, hill training, hill sprints, they're not always fun, but in order to get faster at running, you do have to run faster. And that can be a challenge.
So with that in mind then, so it's a good point, because most people listening to this, the vast majority, I think, will either be occasional runners. They might do their occasional 25-minute run, 5K, maybe a 10K. Some will be doing half marathons, some marathons, some longer. But most don't. Let's be honest, most people don't do that much running that often. It's just an occasional thing because it's fun, it's nice, it's great. You went from a point of doing marathons that were just sort of good, nice, tick-along marathons, a long, 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 long way, to jumping into some really tough stuff. So then let's talk about more of the technical stuff within this, the training block between having done the marathons, and you did a number of marathons, there's lots of kind of background training within there that's built into your system. How long did you allow yourself to say, right, I'm now starting MDS training, I've got to do these 5 marathons-ish in 5 days. How long did you give yourself for a training block for that?
So due to having sort of various health concerns, I was starting in June 2015 to run the Marathon des Sables in April 2016. And my first training block was those 6 months, was actually focused on strength. So it was literally building up muscle, working with a personal trainer, a lot of single leg stuff, just trying to iron out any of the imbalances. And it was also, a lot of back stuff, because when you're running and you're wearing a pack, your shoulders can collapse forward. So it's trying to work on the core. So 6 months solid on that. And then I was very fortunate to actually go out to Australia to start my endurance training block. And I remember starting it on January the 4th. And I had an absolute shocker because I hit my little toe and broke my little toe on my first day of training, but which actually turned out to be a massive benefit, because when you start running in the heat, you need to slow down, because it does place so much more pressure on your body. So you can't necessarily run at the paces that you want to. So I ended up doing a lot of heart rate training when I was over in Australia, monitoring my heart rate, making sure it was very, very low, and just going slow and steady. And so for those three months, January, February, March, it was heat training, it was running sort of 5 times a week. There was back-to-back sessions. There was a lot of time on feet, as well as interspersed with, with hill section, a 5 mile of fartlek training, walk, sprint, jog, walk, sprint, jog. And to be honest, that got me to the start line of the MDS. Not only was I really strong, so I was doing 100K deadlift, I was also very lean. So I had my body fat done. I feel as though, I'm trying to remember now, it was around 18%. So I was strong, lean, and just super lean, fit, really ready for endurance. So I was literally in the best shape of my life before I got to MDS.
Okay, good. So if someone's listening then, so parts of that, talk through maybe the when you're running 5 days a week, and you're now 2-3 months into the training block. This is in the November, December of 2015. at that point, how long is each run? How much are you varying each run? How much are you changing the speed of each run? Can you remember what that looked like on a weekly basis?
Yeah, so it would start out with like a gentle slow. So sometimes it would be time. So you're going to go out and run for 2.5 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. The longest run I think I did was slow run was around 8 hours. Then there was other days where it was distance. And so I think that actually affects you psychologically as well, like in terms of how fast you run, because obviously if you're just doing the distance, you go out, you get it done, you're home a lot faster. Whereas if you're going out for 8 hours, you're a little bit slower. So Mondays would generally be like a 10 miles. Tuesday would be like fartlek training, 5 miles of like sprint work. Wednesday was rest day. Then Thursday, Friday would be time on feet. So 4 or 5 hours, and then another 4 or 5 hours again. And then the weekends were pretty long. Were the longer endurance days, and Sunday was a rest day. But I think there's a lot of, again, I think this comes back to like what your goal is and what you're trying to achieve. So you've got to know your goal before you can commit to your training plan. Because if you're planning to to walk it, just to complete it or to compete it, it's going to massively impact on how much training you have. I think the other thing I'd say as well is at that point in time, I was living with family members. I had like no responsibility in terms of, family or bills or anything like that. So I could focus purely on running. If you're somebody who's got a family, you've got children, you've got a partner, you're working, a full-time job, there's got to be a lot of compromise and a lot of balance with how you're going to fit your training in. Because, I know people who are waking up at 3 a.m. to run their 20 miles and then go do a full day of work and then, deal with family in the evening. And I really didn't have that. So I think it is picking a training schedule that can work for you. And for me, I think one of the best things is actually working with a coach, is actually working with a personal trainer, because I want to outsource that, because I have no ability to say, Sarah, you are doing too much. You're training too hard. You're not training enough. I just want somebody to say to me, Sarah, here is your plan. Go and do it. And then I will go through that plan. Says I to run 10 miles and spend 2 hours walking. That is what I will go and do. Like, I will just make that commitment and get it done. So I think there's lots of considerations. So, following my training plan isn't necessarily going to be of benefit to you depending on what the person's goal is. But I think if you can break it down into the blocks of, the strength training first, build that strength base up, and then focus on the endurance, that's a great tactic to do it, as well as doing the strength training, obviously the endurance training. The other aspect, which I don't think people talk about enough, is actually the rest and the recovery. Making sure that you're getting enough sleep every night, making sure that you're hydrating, you're fueling your body, because a lot of this comes down to making sure that you do not get injured. Because when you start doing that amount of mileage, you are putting your body through a ringer. And actually things like massages and foam rollers and acupuncture mats, all of this needs to be taken into consideration as well. But I definitely say, making sure that you are sleeping, getting enough sleep in. Like, I used to take like afternoon naps as well, which was great for my recovery.
Do you monitor your sleep closely? Do you wear any apps for that sort of thing? Wear any devices? Do I have apps to track it?
No, but what I did start doing is I made a rule for myself. I think after waking up at 5:30, 5:45 for so long, I basically stopped setting an alarm. Because I was just like, I'm just going to listen to my body, like how much sleep do I need? And it actually, over the past couple of years, it has sort of evened out now, where I'm waking up at around 8:30. Whereas some days, I wake up at 7 and it's like, I'm wide awake. I get up then. So I'm very much just trying to listen to my body in terms of how much sleep I get. But also, one of my bad things is that I actually do work from my bed. So when I'm working, if I feel my eyes are closing, then I think, actually, maybe you need a little power nap. Put the laptop aside, 20, 30 minutes, have a little sleep, and then get back to it. So I do enjoy sleep.
I think it's an interesting point. I think that having gone from being in an office working environment and now having your lifestyle set up to be able to cope around these moments where you can work within parts of the day, train parts of the day, and have that flexibility in there, actually what it does is gets us a bit more back towards the way our bodies are designed to work. We're not actually designed to go to work from whatever hour in the morning to whatever hour in the evening and work through a whole day and then expect to be able to sleep okay at night and carry on the next day. That's not how we are. We're actually designed to have rest in the daytime at various points and to eat at the appropriate times, to spread our eating loads out at various points as well, to being a bit more intermittent rather than being in set 3 meals a day, etc. So what you're doing, again, by default on this, is finding a pattern where you are maybe getting a better happy medium of where your body actually should be to respond better. And your point about not getting injured is very relevant around getting enough rest and recovery. So going back to your point with you're training 5 days a week, doing the running in the middle of the MDS training, you're doing the strength work at the start of that and the longer endurance work. And the strength work is often overlooked by most endurance athletes, those that take part occasionally in it. And it's a key part because, as you know, any long endurance event places massive, not just forward stress, but lateral stresses onto your hips and your back, which as you get more tired and fatigued over longer durations, give you lots of strain in the hips and strain in the ITBs and the lower back and into the outside of the knees. So by doing the strength work, there's a great chance of retaining stability as you need to as the events go on. So talk me through the strength work you were doing, the numbers, broadly, the numbers of reps per set you'd be doing. Is that a high rep range? Is that some strength work in there at high resistance as well? Was it a mixture? What was it?
To be honest, I'm going to struggle to remember like a lot of that specific information. All I know that there was a lot of, actually, I do remember this one funny thing. I was doing a split squats with the barbell on my back, and I'd obviously misread the weights that I was putting on. So I think I was doing it with 10s, the bar's 20. So I was doing 40 kg split squats, probably like around 6 each leg. And I'd obviously misread it. And I ended up thinking, oh, it must be 60 kgs. So I ended up putting like 20 on each side and like doing these like 3-4 sets of 6 each leg, but just being destroyed and just like, how, like I'm meant to be getting fitter on my progression. And then I looked at like my training schedule and I was actually like, oh, no wonder that was so tough.
Maybe overshooting slightly.
Yeah, but to be honest, it was a lot of like lunges, split squats, the core, the back, and even like, you know, working on like my ankle strength and calf strength, and you know, like the runner exercises that you do, like a lot of hip open. I don't know why I'm doing this, but you know, hip openers on your legs, and I'm trying to think what else the numbers were, but it was all done. To be honest, we started so gentle. Like I was barely lifting weights when I started, and so it was really great to see that progression where I did, you know, getting to like the deadlifts and back squats and everything else like that. So
I think going into the MDS, that's a really, really important part of the training. Although actually, strangely enough, for the Appalachian Trail being over a long duration, and because it's largely, I'm guessing it's all walking, but the terrain is so varied that strength is really critical in long duration walking in mixed terrain, because you need to have stability around the hips and around the knees and around the back. So MDS, because it's shorter, albeit it's a long way, it's 5 days, it's a little bit easier coping with that duration. You can get through it. Obviously, your feet fall apart and everything else suffers, but you can kind of drag your ass through the whole thing. But the strength work gives you the chance of going a bit faster, without question. On a long event like the Appalachian Trail or the Lycean, it's different.
I was just going to say, my feet from MDS, like when people tell me like the horror stories, like my feet were beautiful. Like I got like 3 little tiny blisters on it. And there's videos on YouTube. Like I got a few blisters on the side, but I remember they have people called like the doc trotters who are like the foot experts. And I went in there because I had these blisters, and there was a French guy next to me. He's like, oh, why are you here? And I was like, oh, I've got some blisters. And he was like, show me. And I showed him my feet with these like little, like, to be honest, they're even like pretty and pink and just like these little, you know, with the gross juicy stuff inside, like not that bad. And he showed me his foot and he'd lost the sole, and it was just like awful and disgusting. But what was interesting about that is part of my foot preparation was using something called a NOK cream, NOK cream. So I was massaging my feet morning and evening because I was going for like soft and supple. I'd also been to Pro Feet in London and had like my gait analysis and foot analysis done. They recommended the trainers that I would wear. So I bought 2 pairs of trainers, one to train in and then one fresh pair to run in during the race. Like the socks, I did the research into the socks. So I did everything possible to protect and look after my feet. But what was really fascinating, there was a guy in my tent as well who was ex-army, and his feet got absolutely destroyed. And we were talking about what he'd done, and he'd literally done the same thing as I had done. He'd been rubbing in like the not cream. He was going for soft and supple, but for him, it just hadn't worked. So a lot of it can be trial and error. There was somebody else who put like surgical spirit on. They were trying to get their feet as hard as possible. I don't think that worked out well for them. Other people, their feet had swelled so much, they were having to split their trainers because they just couldn't get their feet inside the shoe. Although I always, we talked before about like the planning and preparation. One of the reasons I always think it's so funny is I remember a guy rocked up and he was like, because you need gaiters for the MDS because of the sand. So he rocked up and he's like, right, I've got my gaiters. What do I do with my gaiters now? And everyone was just like, but you can't attach them to your shoe because you need to take your shoe to a cobbler's to get the Velcro sewn into your shoe. But because he hadn't done the planning, he didn't know that. And so he got these very expensive, beautiful gaiters, but were useless because he hadn't done the planning and the preparation beforehand. And I would just say, what's just moving on to the Appalachian Trail in terms of the fitness and the strength. I went into the Appalachian Trail. I was so fit, so strong. Again, you can't train for a 3-month event. I was just training for the first 2 weeks. But what ended up happening to me is I ended up going over on my left ankle quite a few times. And you know how your body will compensate for you? That ended up impacting on my knee. So when my ankle couldn't do this, the side to side movement, my knee took over. That then impacted on my left hip. And so all of my left side ended up getting so weak. I also ended up losing about 2 stone in weight. And so I lost all my fat, all of my muscle. And it actually probably took me about 2.5 years after I finished MDS to get back to the point where I could walk properly without sort of being out of breath and being exhausted, and a really long time to build all of the muscle back up. So I think that's one of the reasons it's just sort of worth mentioning, these physical challenges, or my body certainly struggled to recover after that. And that's one of the reasons I did the cycle trip from Vancouver down to Mexico, was because I wouldn't have been able to walk or hike because my left knee was still basically there was a nerve behind it which had basically gone into shock, and I couldn't straighten out my left leg. So you can have a lot of, but then I went and cycled 4,000 kilometers, as you do. So you make things work
as you do. Did you go into the trail? Because it's going to obviously be 100 days long, roughly. And that's the target, I'm guessing. So with that in mind, did you go into it? Did you put weight on to go into that? Again, going back to Ben Fogel's example of this, he's classic. There's so many weird things. He gained about 10, 12 kilos in fat mass to be able to try and get into the boat to row across, looking at James Cracknell's butt on the way back over, and lost about 15, 18 kilos on the way through, or 20 kilos. Did you go into it? Did you physically gain mass specifically to go into it?
Yeah.
How much, roughly?
Probably about a stone. Probably about a stone. So by the time I got to the halfway point, I was back at my normal weight. And then I lost another stone on top. But if you look at the videos of me, I was so petite and so tiny. But I say one of the interesting things is around the food as well. So when you're training for something like MDS, you actually end up doing a lot of fat burning because you can't consume enough calories. Your body, that's the state it's going to get into. And to be honest, fat burning can be better than burning carbohydrates. It's more efficient. And so I've been doing a very low carb, very, very keto style, which worked incredibly well for me. I felt great on that. And I made the assumption that when I went onto the Appalachian Trail that I would also be able to be keto, be low carb. And that was just not the case because of the food that I was eating, which was sugar and processed foods and junk, basically. And it's just amazing what your body can achieve even when you're fueling it with utter rubbish. And part of that challenge was because I was solo and unsupported and under time pressure, I was getting my resupply food from places like garages. So, you go and buy 10 Snickers, 10 protein bars. I was also stoveless. So that definitely introduced a few challenges in terms of how I was expecting to perform, low carb, fat burning, and then literally not being able, there's something called hiker hunger. Whereas people would be like, you've got to eat more food. It's like, all I do is eat constantly. But when you're wearing a heavy pack and walking 20 odd miles a day, you are burning through so many calories, you cannot replace it. And your body has gone into starvation mode. It is just, incredibly challenging.
Have you tried playing with using keto eating, quite sort of severe, strict keto eating within training or competing? Because there's quite a lot of evidence now about using keto within sports, but really mainly in endurance. It's not really appropriate for doing anything which is power-based or doing shorter, more intensive approaches. But within the Tour de France and cycling world, there's some playing with it. It's not the extreme version of it. I mean, extreme keto is about 80% fat, 75% fat, and tiny carbs and some protein. It's not quite the end of it, but they're cycling in parts of the keto approach at pretty high fat levels into their diet to make sure they can cope with this endurance approach, medium level, low to medium level, and not get the sugar highs and lows you get from feeding in carbohydrates. How much have you played with that? And when you've played with that, to what duration has that been? Of what endurance events has it been, or training has it been? And how successful has it been for you? How's that worked?
I think what's really interesting about the keto is a lot of that research has been done on men. And women, when I have done keto before and gone very, very low carb, I have loved it. And I felt strong, fit, healthy, had no issues with it. I really did think it did suit me very, very well. However, I think you cannot maintain that going forward. I would still say even now, I'm probably like quite low carb. Like I wouldn't really choose, like I'd always go for the steak instead of like the pasta. And I don't really eat like white potatoes. I would have like sweet potatoes, but I'd rather have like the green veg, like the peas and the asparagus and the broccoli and the cauliflower and stuff like that. But I think what's really interesting is I spoke to an incredible woman called Dr. Stacey Sims, who wrote a book called Raw. And in that, she talks more about women's needs for carbohydrates, and especially like linked into like your menstrual cycle. So certain times of the month, you do actually need to consume more calories and more carbohydrates. And so when I started reading that, because I've also done like fasted training as well for probably about 20 years, I've done fasted training, like never eaten before I've worked out, before I've done for a run. And even, on the long stage of MDS, I didn't eat before I went running because it's just something I've never done before. And, reading her research that she's bringing in, it's made me start to try and make these changes to my diet. So trying to have like, a rice cake with peanut butter and some bananas on top before I go for a workout, trying to consume more carbs, but not get the carb bloat basically. And it's really fascinating. So I try not to stick to anything like diet wise too particular. Like I'm just moderation, not being restrictive at all, because I think it just takes you can go down these like sort of alleyways, and to be honest, like I want to have like freedom of choice. If I want a gin and tonic at night, I'll have one. If I want to have this, I'll have that. If I want some chocolate, etc., etc. And so it's that magic word, which is balance, and it is all about being sensible. But I eat, and I don't even want to use the word clean, but we don't really have like processed foods in our house. So even this morning it was avocado and eggs, and we've got walnuts and chia seeds and all of that. And I do supplement with like protein shakes as well immediately after a workout. But I think with the food and the nutrition, I think the best advice is, to be honest, is trial and error. It's so personal. It's listening to people saying, okay, so that's what they have for breakfast, that's what they did for lunch, that's what they did straight after. Let me try that. How does that work with my body? Can I digest it? The big challenge of doing ultras is digestion issues, basically. Like, can you digest the food? Is it coming out in a pleasant way? And sometimes it's not, and people can have a lot of issues, and it can stop them performing and racing. And so it's why on MDS you tested all your food before you go out, like different flavors, how you're going to feel, because your taste buds can change. So you might be loving the savory stuff, then when you get out there, you're like, oh my God, give me all the sweet stuff. Or you might be a very sweet person when to start, thinking, I want all the chocolate and the Nutella and blah, 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 and you get there and thinking, I cannot stomach this. So I think trial and error, trying what works for you. And to be honest, it's just something, what can you maintain? Like, how can you fit it into your life? How can you make it a lifestyle?
I think those are all absolutely right points. I think what's interesting more recently is there's a huge growth in tech devices that we can now use and get more data and information. Problem with that, of course, is it's a lot of data. It's a lot of stuff to try and sieve your way through and understand what's going on in your body. Wearing things like continuous glucose monitors is a really good tool to understand how you respond to sugars, because frankly, if you can take on sugars and process those well and not suffer with extremes, highs and lows, then they're not too much of an issue for you. Understanding the ways in which your body digests over long periods. There's a device called a lumen, which lets you look at the ways in which your body is burning calories, but how it's burning sugars, how it's burning fats efficiently or not efficiently based on how you've eaten and what you've rested as. Again, it's lots of data. So you've got to have the ability and the inclination to actually look at all that data and break it all down. So what you're doing is a touchy-feely approach of that, of understanding how you feel when you run on each day, energy-wise. Is it good? Is it bad? When you're competing, what works for you? And you get into the nitty-gritty of that without having the data there right now. But someone listening to this who wants more, those kind of things are worth looking at. And your digestive system is a huge part of being able to perform and compete. We know that for sure. So understanding your microbiome, understanding how your gut actually breaks down the food and utilizes it, how you're able to focus, concentrate, and stay motivated, all key parts. And your diversity of diet that you're going for, by the sound of it, by using things like chia seeds and using avocado, gives you what you need to try and have enough of a functioning gut to absorb and use the energy to its max. So yeah, you're right to not get bogged down in one thing. Just good to know which approaches do and don't work. And the keto thing is such a hot topic, not just within endurance and competing, but also within longevity, that understanding which bits and to which extent might work for each individual is worth people experimenting with and trying out for sure. Now, as we look at this now, you started doing the long endurance events when you were how old? You were 33?
32, 33,
the first marathon
yeah.
Yeah, okay. So you're now, how old are you now? You are now
40. Oh my goodness. Yes, I celebrated my 40th last September. But you know, I used to hate my birthday, but I think it's a privilege to get older. Like I really do. Especially when you've lost friends who, at younger stages in your life, you think actually it's a privilege to be around. So yeah, but no, it's really interesting actually. I think I know, I feel as though I'm answering the question before you even asked it, but like how have like things changed?
Tell me.
I mean, I remember back 32, 33. I could do 2 training sessions a day. I could recover. I could feel great the following day. And I definitely noticed, especially I think around 38, 39, that actually my recovery wasn't quite as good. And sometimes I wasn't feeling as strong, or I couldn't do quite as much. And I had to tweak things a little bit. So I've definitely started to notice some changes. And I think that's also impacted on how much I train and trying to be really much more specific with what I'm doing. So, especially like lifting heavy weights. You probably know this stat better than me, but I don't know if it's after the age of 30 or 40, women start losing muscle mass and it gets replaced by fat, which to be honest just makes me feel disgusting. And I'm like, no, I want to be strong, fit and healthy. And a lot of women don't lift heavy enough. So, lifting heavy weights, doing, HIIT classes, high intensity training sort of a couple of times a week, but also in terms of, I'm now spending a lot more time on like my flexibility and mobility. So doing yoga, specifically yin yoga, I found has worked incredibly well for me, because I think over the years, my hip flexors have gotten so tight that actually I need to spend some time, trying to relax them, and yin yoga is absolutely amazing. But no, I've definitely noticed a lot of changes, and and even just like the weight accumulation around your stomach, and perimenopause and all of these things. So changes are happening, but actually I think it's really important that women are aware of this. And there's great books out there, like Dr. Stacey Sims. There's another one who I can't remember the author's name now, but talking about perimenopause and menopause, but how women can embrace the change that is happening and still be strong and powerful. My mum, she's going to hate me saying this, but my mum's like 69 and is still, she's still lifting heavy weights at the gym. And sometimes I look over and she's like deadlifting like 70 kgs. And I'm like, I need to up my game here a bit. She's 20, 30 years older than me. But look, the aim of the game is to be fit, strong, and healthy for as long as possible. But I've definitely noticed I have to be more selective at my training. I've got to be better focused on that rest and the recovery as well. Yeah.
Would you say that's going to change the way in which you now pick events going forward at all? Because there's clearly, it is harder to train quite such a long endurance so frequently. And this is where performance always comes down very slightly. So are you now choosing your events a bit more wisely?
I think so. I think after the experience with the Appalachian Trail, after I completed that, I think it changed a lot of things for me in terms of, why am I doing these challenges? Who am I trying to impress? And I realized that actually I'm not trying to impress anybody. It comes down to me. What do I want to do? What do I want to achieve? And I think putting a time pressure on challenges and events, I don't really like doing that now. So for, I'm doing a lot of walking challenges, a lot of hiking challenges. So next month I'm going to be heading off to walk the Wales Coastal Path, which is 870 miles. Starting in Chester and heading down to Chepstow. And due to various time commitments, I do actually need to do this challenge in 50 days. And I'm intrigued and nervous at the same time, because it does mean that I do need to do about 17, 18 miles per day to complete it. And I have to be back by that date. And I'm just going to be really fascinated to see how it does impact on my body. Mentally, I know I can do it. I will do it. I'm just wondering what state my body will be in at the end. But I'm definitely more like, I suppose I've just become a little bit more relaxed about the challenges I do. So whether it's walking the Camino Portuguese, which is like 690 kilometers from Lisbon up to the Camino de Santiago. Yeah, like taking out that time pressure so I can really like actually listen to my body and say, actually, hold on, do I need a rest day here? Do I need to reduce things? Or actually, I'm feeling pretty strong. So actually maybe I can push it a little bit further.
So are you choosing events now? I mean, there's quite a lot of walking events within that rather than going for that Marathon Des Sables, which is obviously a running event. So have you changed some of that and gone away from the impact stuff, or is that just a coincidence?
I think it's just more of a coincidence and wanting to try new things. I mean, I'm actually really looking at wanting to climb some mountains as well. So Aconcagua has come up on the cards, and it's like, ooh, now that could be a really interesting challenge. Again, it's a different type of challenge due to the altitude. So I'm already starting to do like my research and planning. So you've probably heard of like the Altitude Centre down in London. They do an assessment for you to see how your body will react at altitude. So before I can make any commitments about wanting to go and climb, big mountains, my step one is to go to the Altitude Centre, let them do the tests on me so they can turn around and say, Sarah, you are built for the mountains, or Sarah, no, you can do it, but your body is not going to thank you for it. But, variety, I'd love to do some, kayaking trips as well. That would be really fantastic. I'd love to do another big cycling trip because that's just a joy and so much more gentle on your body. I still remember when I was cycling down the Pacific Coast Highway and I'd cycle 60, 80 miles and I'd be somewhere at like 2 p.m. And I was like, oh, I don't know what to do with myself. I've got all of this free time. Whereas on the Appalachian Trail, you're walking from 8 until it goes dark, basically. So 12-hour days. And that was very pleasant. It was almost a bit like a holiday.
How long would you say it took you to go out of being in the mode of being a 9-to-5er, working in banking in that area, to being where you are now, and actually not forget the past, but actually move into this different headspace? This is a very different headspace to being in an office.
Massive. To be perfectly honest, I was 2 years after I left, I would wake up in the middle of the night, like stressed, thinking, oh my God, what have I got to do on Monday? And then it was having to be like, Sarah, you don't work there anymore. It's okay. You don't have to do anything. I think also when I did make the transition, I started building my business for myself, building Tough Girl Challenges, building the website, trying to figure all this stuff out. One of my big issues was feeling guilty, like especially if I was having any rest and relaxation, it would be like, well, why are you resting? You haven't got a business. You're not making any money. Get back to work. You can't watch a movie now. And so I probably struggled for, I would say, about 4 years trying to fully make the switch. Whereas now I'm so much more comfortable with what I have to do, what I have to deliver. And also I give myself permission to be like, Sarah, if you don't want to work on a Monday, you do not need to work on a Monday. If you want to work on a Sunday, you do that. I know what I've got to do and I know how to do it. And I have completely let go of that guilt and I think also my priorities have changed. My priorities are my health and my fitness. I want to go to the gym in the morning. I want to do my 9:30 to 10:30 class. I want to come back. I want to have my protein shake. I want to do my stretching. I want to do my foam rolling. I want to get my massages in. But that can take time. And I literally, 3 or 4 years, I'd say, to adapt. But also it's a lot easier once you become established, because, now, Tough Girl Podcast has won 3 awards. Like you mentioned, it's had over 2 million downloads. I've got a brand, I've got a business. I work with brands and companies, doing sponsored hikes and doing sponsored adventures and challenges, etc. And so I'm in a very, very different place to when I first started. But those early years were such a struggle. And I think also people just think that like sometimes you're like an overnight success, and it's like, no, I've been, plugging away at this for 6.5 years, 7 years, trying to develop and learn these new skills. But in terms of happiness, oh my goodness, like I just honestly feel so privileged, so full of gratitude that I did make that change. I had people laugh at my face when I initially told them. They say, oh, I'm an adventurer, I'm a motivational speaker. And they would laugh at me. And then I remember like back in 2019, it's like, I'd cycle the Pacific Coast Highway. I then spent 3 months in Australia. I was then over in India, spending a month doing yoga, becoming a qualified yoga instructor before heading off to do back-to-back multiple sponsored hikes. And I was thinking, this is my life now. Like, this is amazing. And I think that was a real eye-opener, especially when the people who were laughing at me were still going to the office doing their 8 to 9. But they would, we made choices early on in our 30s. And for the first couple of years, they were really, really difficult for me. And now it's paying off. And other people haven't made choices. They've stuck with what they are happy with, hopefully.
Well, it's good to hear. The point I made originally, I think at the top of the whole episode, is this massive change that the world's gone through. I think we're sort of seeing it in lots of people now making their life decisions in how they work. And people have different views on that, whether flexi working is the thing, whether people should be back in the office, whether they should be working from home. And everyone's take on it is different for sure. But I think what's very clear is we're putting our health a bit more front and central for the first time, I think, maybe ever, frankly, actually. And this is a good time. And it's why companies like yours, Tough Girl Challenges, have things people can get involved with and do. Listen to your experiences of going and doing the events that you do as well on your podcast. They put on your guest on your podcast, Tough Girl podcast series, give people inspiration as well of what they have done and what they can get involved with. It's a good chance for people to actually just take stock and think about what it is that makes you genuinely happy. And in most cases, it's the simple things, and our health, our well-being, a sense of purpose and achievement tends to be the thing. I think you've found it. So well done to you. It's an amazing thing. You've got a great story. You tell it very well. And I think it's just intriguing to see how you now crack it again. One thing you think about, I had Vassos Alexander on recently. He's done the Spartathlon. Now, does that sort of tickle your fancy? That's kind of like extreme.
It's extreme. I mean, that's a hell of a race. That's a 100-miler. Athens. I've spoken to quite a few women who've done it.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the distance.
I think it's 250 kilometers in 36 hours or something crazy. It's a ridiculous thing. Yeah, whatever. It's there somewhere. It's a ludicrous amount. So that's the outer.
But I think, there's a ballot entry, and I think you've also got to have hit certain minimum requirements before you can even apply to be in that race. Yeah, that doesn't tickle my fancy, I'm afraid. That's a sort of a challenge too far for me.
Park that one, go to Athens and watch the start, and then be done. That'd be the way to go with that one. Sarah, you've been a great guest. Thank you so much for coming on board and telling us all about your experiences. People can find you on the Tough Girl podcast and at your website, Tough Girl Challenges. So they can find out all that you're doing and all they can get involved with and be part of that whole thing. Congratulations on all of that. It's amazing. You deserve every success. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.